Order, please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could be allowed to speak before you end up going into your agenda, please?
Can it wait?
I would prefer that they can do it at the beginning of the meeting.
Pertaining to what?
Observations I've made, plus some other stuff that I want to make members aware of.
Well, let's do the minutes, and then we'll get into it has to do with the budget?
No?
Okay, well, we'll do the minutes first, and
Okay.
then do that. Okay, the first item is the minutes of February 7th, 2019.
He's got the 7th, I don't have that.
If I can get my phone to open, I will share them with her, but,
Bless you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, these are the ones that we got, like, at the start of the meeting last week, right, or last time?
At the end of the meeting, you think?
6:30, that's right when we started. Make a motion to accept the minutes from the February 7th meeting as written.
Second.
motion made and seconded. That was seconded by Mike.
Yes.
All right. Any discussion, corrections, or changes? Do you have,
No, sorry.
if you wanna, you can read that, we'll flip through that. I hope it stays up. Is there any changes or corrections? Anybody have any?
No, sir.
No, I don't.
You all set?
Thank you.
All right. On the motion to accept the minutes of February 7th, 2019. Mike,
Yes.
Tony,
Abstain.
Amy,
Yes.
Lee,
Abstain.
Deb,
Yes.
Will?
Abstain.
Yes. Meeting minutes from February 21st, 2019.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes as written for the advisory committee's February 21st meeting.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Does anyone have any changes or updates or corrections?
I have no corrections.
Everything all set? All right. On the motion to accept the minutes, February 21st, 2019, Mike,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Will,
Abstain.
and yes. All right. All right, the next item on the agenda is,
Do you
hold on,
want me
is,
to wait?
what is it that you have
Well, I
to
have
discuss?
some feedback I want to take and give as to some things that have happened, and I think it's pertinent to have it before the meeting so that it grounds folks as to some issues.
Mr. Chair, he seems pretty passionate about what he's got. I don't, unless it's going up your nose sideways, I don't mind letting him go on, as long as he's brief.
I won't keep it too long. I try not to.
All right,
Thank you. I'd like to thank the chairman and also Mr. Curry.
You're welcome.
As a member, I'm not expecting any responses or debates on the content of what I have to say. I mean, this is presented well-intended information to grounding the committee members as to what the committee's responsibilities are. As we serve as part of the legislative body being townspeople, 30% of them being seniors, and out of those seniors, about 15 to 20% are below poverty line. In addition to that, as you heard during the shutdown of the government, that 74% of the population in the United States lives paycheck to paycheck, whether they be on some type of Social Security or a regular paycheck. I want to bring those facts out because after I watched the last meeting, there were some statements made that, though they may be well-intended, when viewed by the audience and myself, and I got some feedback, we don't advocate for different things. We don't advocate for and are responsible for pushing tax increases. It's not our responsibility. Nor are we responsible for selling or supporting tax overrides. That's not our responsibility. It is our job to receive the town budget warrant articles from the selectman and the administrator, to review them to the detail that's necessary for us to make a recommendation for, against, or an alternative to the citizens of the town. We also must remember that not all people have the internet, cable TV, so they can't view and get the information pertaining to town business. So we have to take it into trying to help meet the requirements. It's our job to help meet the requirements of town government without making it non-affordable to the majority of the townsfolk. Also, what was brought up was the sewage meeting, and I think everybody needs to take and end up looking at that and seeing what Mr. Galt Mr. Jelinek comments were. It was, Mr. Jelinek, early on in the, when the administrator came on, was in support of this individual. After dealing with him for 1 year, you'll see his comments. I'm not gonna make his comments per se. He ended up calling him narcissistic and a liar. I tend to take an end up thing saying that he's a spin doctor and a prevaricator as to his dealings with folks. I also, the last point I want to take and end up making is that I want to make people aware that the next men's meeting, and Mr. Jelinek said he thought it was a power grab for the sewerage. It looks to me like we have the same issue with the advisory. On the agenda is a very disheartening thing. If you look at Mass General Law, Chapter 40, it states that we're in charge of the Emergency Reserve Fund. And it spells out that the town can't appropriate more than 5%. Doesn't say we can't appropriate, we can appropriate any money up to that 5%. They limit us to that. And it's our responsibility to take and end up delegating the money out of that. Over the last couple of years, the administrator has taken the position of not having his department heads come to us. But on the agenda, I find that the advisory committee reserve estimation and use, they're actually gonna look at writing a policy to limit how much money goes into the reserve, below the 5%. I think that's not correct. That's the town to vote the amount of money, number one. It's on our budget. We allocate that in our budget, and it's up to us to take it and end up substantiating that. Unfortunately, like I said, he hasn't allowed his department heads to come forward like they should, without actually, they should notify him, yes, but he should not be saying you can't go. I'll find it somewhere else. Especially if it's unforeseen and emergency. I want to make you aware of that, because take a look at that meeting and take a look at the documentation. I did. It's in there. And it's limiting it to less than 1%. And we were actually talking about 1% of the overall budget at one particular time. With that, I'm gonna take and end up thanking the chair and the members for allowing me to speak and have my say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I made note of that, and I had planned to attend that meeting.
The sewer?
No,
No, I attended the sewer meeting. I plan to attend the selectmen's meeting next Wednesday. That's the agenda, the next meeting, the agenda
that's the
item that
13th.
was.
Oh, I didn't.
So can, when we get to member comments, could you kind of give us an overview of the sewer meeting?
I can. The next item is, and this is for informational purposes, it did come up, when we were talking, and I just want members, I believe I emailed it, but I couldn't find it, so I printed it out. It's on the second page of the agenda. And, I went to the school committee meeting last night where they certified budget, and the chairman,
Talks about the 112 budget.
One more of these.
You had a handout.
I'm sorry,
Thanks, appreciate it.
did everybody get one? Okay.
Do you have one?
Yes. I printed out 7, I should have one. Chairman Hughes sort of touched on this, because there was a question asked if, what happens if something doesn't pass. And basically, however the town decides to pay for the town's assessment, I'm speaking of Templeton, however they decide to cover it, or if the town meeting simply says no, as they rejected it in entirety in 13. It goes back to the school committee. They can certify a lower number, or they can send the same number back, and that goes, and they have a time frame, and it's explained in here. It's you can find this on the Department of Elementary Secondary Education. It's 603 Code of Mass Regulations 4100. And we are a two-school district. If you have like a five or member or something, it's just 2/3. But if this is not solved, is not a budget agreed upon by July 1st, then you start paying 1/12 of the previous fiscal year's school budget until you either come to an agreement on a budget, and you have a joint district meeting, and if it doesn't pass there, once December 1st comes, then the commissioner of DESI comes in and looks at town books, the schools, and he determines a budget and says, here you are, and you have to pay that. It has happened in recent years, maybe in the past 10 or fewer years, a couple local school districts where it went all the way to December. And no, the school doesn't get everything they want, and neither does the town, and it's not a fun process.
It's
In
basically a
13,
compromise.
Templeton went to the joint district, and then we passed an override to support the budget. We didn't go all the way to December 1st. But where this is, it's over, part of it is the school increases for the school operational costs, and some of it is state-required spending. Our minimum contribution went up because your property values increased, and suddenly you're wealthier, whether you realize it or not, and you can afford to pay more money.
Really?
Really.
I just did my taxes, I don't feel that way.
Well, yeah. So, and that, and the increase in school transportation cost over last year's, it's $100 and something thousand. So all told, it's over $1 million that Templeton is looking to having to come up with, one way, shape, or form, and that's a big chunk. And if it goes by an override, there's a gamble there, whether the people say, heck no, or whatever, they choose. And this is, if it's voted down no, this is the path this outline is the path that we will end up going down. And I just wanted everyone to be aware of it and have it, for reference, and if you want to look up more detail. I just think it's something that we should be aware of, so if we get to town meeting and they say no, then we know
This is great.
what's coming.
Thank you very much.
I just think that's important for everybody to have the information. So that was the reason to put that on here. As I spoke with Chairman Hughes last night, I hope we don't have to go down this road, but just in case. The next item is, I put the town spending plan, the budget book. I didn't make that meeting. I was busy having fun out on the highways. So, and I know a lot of members, it was their first time in getting this book, and it's available electronically on the town's website, and a lot of the worksheets, I emailed it out today to everyone. I just put this on here just in case, and getting ready for a Saturday when we'll be here, and that will be our table over there. And the department heads, in the past, they come in, they sit at the table, and they talk to the selectmen, and then advisory, you have any questions for them, and you can, ask them to justify their budget, questions about this, that, everything. But in case there was any, things you're seeing in the book, any issues you may have, or, what ifs or how was, I just thought I'd put it on here so at this meeting, since we were had to have a meeting to get the minutes done to meet the 30-day requirement. And I hope people have had time. I've been going through it and making notes of things for different items to ask the department heads. I mean, this is the chance that we get to ask the department heads, and then we will get it. And most of our meetings from here on out will probably deal with this. And as soon as they, we have to think about, and believe we picked, May 2nd looked rather good for a pre-town meeting thing. If they stick to the schedule that's in here and been given to us previous. And hopefully in some of our meetings, we'll, all the little questions on the warrant and stuff, we can get answered and done. So when we get to pre-town meeting, we are just voting recommendations, and we're not sitting here till midnight asking questions.
There's a lot of blanks in the warrant that was in there, the draft warrant.
Yeah,
There are a lot of
and-
X's and O's.
And
I don't
last
think they were
year,
hugs and kisses.
the school budget was certified last night, so we will be getting a letter, as will the Board of Selectmen, in a few days. I might email Sue Varney and see if she can send it electronically as well. But then that's required by law. Then we will have that, because what's in this budget book now is different from what they certified. And I did not. Templeton's share of the operating costs increase, just from Narragansett, is $988,335. Our total increase is $1,146,654. That includes the transportation increase over last year of $104,824. And again, I'm gonna email Sue Varney and have this sent electronically. There's $6,655 in additional appropriation, that's over the previous. And there's, because you're suddenly wealthier, you get a minimum contribution increase of $214,745. The operating budget voted was 23,125,118, and they have a total of 21,948,949. That leaves 1,176,169 to be divided between Templeton and Phillipston. And just so you can feel nice and warm and fuzzy, Phillipston's increase is $187,834 versus Templeton's $988,335. That's the 80-20 split,
And more than
roughly.
likely, they'll probably do, because if it passes in their community as well as ours, Phillipston will more than likely use free cash as they've done in the past to make that up. We don't have that luxury.
So, this is one of the reasons, I mean, it's $1,150,000, just about, $1,146,000. That's a chunk of money, considering they, bonding out for the construction of the school and a police station, in addition to this hitting the tax rate. I think this year it's a coin toss, since there was just an override last year. I'm expecting a lot of people at town meeting. And again, this large figure is another reason, one of the main reasons why I wanted to make everybody aware of the 1/12 budget scenario. And this sheet I'll email Sue Varney tonight, as a matter of fact. And they went into executive session after their meeting, so I didn't get to talk to members, and I would've asked last night, but, so you don't have to wait, so you'll have a copy, everyone will have a copy of that.
Will the superintendent be coming to make the final presentation like he did last year, or?
I spoke to him a little bit, and I told him I was gonna ask him if he would come at least one, perhaps two 2 more of our meetings.
Yep.
Just to speak to this and just, to get things clear on any questions or concerns, but it's just another venue for people to watch and, people to hear the whys and the hows and the whats and to reiterate that the Narragansett Regional School District, despite what people might wanna say or put out by some groups or whoever, they don't require an override. They do a service educating kids. I don't agree with some of the things in their budget, I don't agree with the funding formula, all kinds of stuff. But at the end of the day, this is what they chose. They present an assessment or a bill to the town, and then the town picks how they're gonna pay for it, or if they're gonna pay it, and how they pay it. That's on the town. If there's an override needed, there's an override needed to fund the operational costs of the town of Templeton. This is the biggest bill the town gets for any one thing, but it is nonetheless a bill for the operating costs of the town of Templeton. Narragansett Regional does not need an override. They give us a bill.
They have a budget.
Like heating oil, electricity, salt, anything like that, we just get a bill. And you come up with a way to pay for it. And if the town chooses or needs an override, then it's an override for the operating costs of the town of Templeton. Again, a lot of this thing is in the budget, I don't agree with, I don't like, but at the end of the day, it's a bill and it's a hard one to swallow. You paid your tax bills today, wait till you see your next one. You'll feel less wealthy than you do now. It's I think it's $1.50, $1.60. It's
$1.50.
dropped a little bit, but, on the tax rate, just, if do an override, just to cover this. We don't have the reserves, the cuts, the room in the budget, the town operating budget, I mean, you could, but it would be like, and even still, I don't think it's there. So, again, there's several options, and none of them are good. But we just gotta deal with the facts and inform town meeting, this is what we think based on this, and you know, you people vote, your money. Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, as you said, it's a pretty large number. My feelings is that between the school and the town, there should be some compromises on both sides. I believe the school budget for the override is a lot more than the community might be able to afford. Is an override needed? It looks like we're going to need some level of money that can end up funding that school. But on the town side, there needs to also be a compromise as to cutting back on some of the budgets and some of the things that are in the budget. So that the school is asking for less, the town is paying a little bit more to reduce the amount of money of the override. That's just my general feeling. That's to me is cooperation between the two entities. I don't see that happening, unfortunately. Some communities, that works very well. This one, it does not work well. We're gonna have to make our recommendation based on what we're handed when all said and done for both sides.
And to just top on, and to add to that a little bit, there was probably an opportunity for a little discussion, you know, last night before they voted. I believe I was the only person from any kind of, well, the chairman of the board of the school committee is on the Phillipston Finance Committee. But she's sitting there in a role as the school committee and a school committee chair, and, you know, I've talked with Margaret, and, you know, she's, hey, I don't like this, but I'm on the school committee, so I look out, when I'm here, I look out, you know, for the school, and when I get back to Phillipston, then you start looking at.
When she
how you-
understands both
how
her
you gonna-
roles
how you gonna
as to
pay for this.
what she
But
belongs
there
on.
was nobody from the Board of Selectmen or anything there to make any of this. It's still time, you know, I mean, you can send it back to the school committee, there is a process where, you know, they could reconsider it. It can even happen at town meeting, you know, hey, this town meeting can make a non-binding recommendation, hey, instead of just flat out rejecting it, or they can reject it with, hey, could you, bump this down a little bit? It's possible. I'm not sure that's gonna happen. Based on the conversations, the comments that I heard from school committee members last night, this is what we need to support the kids, the schools, this, and, I get it, they're there to support that, just like we try to look out for the entire town of Templeton. So, it's possible, and there is a little room there to do that, I don't see it happening, but I'm not gonna say, it can't happen, or it won't, but, the chances are probably slim, but strange things have happened at town meeting. So, and we will get to, discuss this here this Saturday at 8:30.
One other thing, Mr. Chairman,
I hope,
is that
yes,
it goes to town meeting, it may or may not pass. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't appear on the ballot. If it does pass, it goes on to the ballot,
well, that's.
where
if
the final say-so is.
If the selectmen put an override question on the
Yes.
ballot. Otherwise, it will be a contingency vote, no matter which way it goes. And then you have till September 15th to have an election. Because it could fail at the town election right after the annual town meeting. And you have till September 15th. They could hold, have some meetings, talk to people, explain things to them, and hold a special election to try to get that contingency vote passed at the ballot. But after September, then, and if you don't have a funding mechanism, then it's a soupy mess. Thankfully, we're not in a position to
Yeah,
have to
we-
sit at the hot seat to deal with that, to come up with the
Yep.
plan, but, it will be a contingency vote at town meeting. If there is an override, it should be a ballot, a warrant article, blah, 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 Prop 2.5 contingent upon it passing at the ballot. And that's one of the, you go into town meeting not knowing, where last year it passed at the ballot, you went into town meeting, you had the override, you just had to do the appropriation. Because town meeting can still say, no, we don't want to spend that money, even though the override passes. You say, no, we don't want to spend that money, we're going to let that excess levy capacity sit there till next year. So, but that's a better scenario, in my opinion, than a contingency vote, which historically has passed, contingency votes have passed town meeting, but not done so well at the election, at the ballot.
There was at that annual town meeting that it did come up as an override, some discussion, and the school committee did listen to some pushback as far as reducing the amount. It didn't happen, it went to district, there was some additional discussion. Some of us here have gone through that, so we a little bit familiar, so, this is good that you understand what the whole process is. And it's not really, they tried to make it, that particular year, they tried to make it look bad, that if it didn't pass at the district level when they had their meeting, that it would go to the state and that would be really bad. It's not really bad, as you heard, it can end up being a compromise, which the town should already have done
Right.
when the state comes in.
That's the bad part about it, you lose the control.
You
get
lose the
told
control,
what
exactly
you're-
right.
You get told what you're doing, but you do have the opportunity to avoid that. But, so again, this Saturday, 8:30 a.m. in this conference room, we will begin the all-day process of going over this book, and each department head comes in and you get to ask questions and, justifications and,
Who moderates it, Mr. Chair?
what's that?
Who moderates it?
That, it's a meeting by the Board of Selectmen, and we're there jointly, so they usually, and whether you agree
They
with it
set
or
the
not,
pace.
Carter talks to them, the
They will
department head will come in, and say, okay, talk about your budget, and the selectmen will ask if they got any questions or anything, and then, we get it. And the moderator really is like the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. We are
Unfortunately,
attending a meeting, and like I said, the layout, whether you like it, agree it or not, that's what we have to deal with, and that's how it runs.
Yeah, I
And
just
it-
wonder who's in charge.
Yeah, the first year, it was a little awkward, and we'd go to ask a question or something, and we'd kinda shut down. The next time, it was a little better and smoother, and I
Yeah,
expect this
Okay.
will be
So-
better.
when we watch like, when the Board of Selectmen have business to deal with, they usually pause real close to the end. Is that what you witnessed, or is that how you think it'll work?
It's actually a little more loose and relaxed than that.
Okay,
As far as, we'll go back and forth, and like I said, the first year, it was sorta like that. The second year, it was a little
That's
looser
good.
and a little better. And there was a little more, questions, that, you raise your hand and say, hey, what about this? And after, even while the selectmen are asking questions of clarification, there was one department, there was a lengthy back and forth. It got a little, boisterous, but.
you?
And then there was a number that nobody couldn't find, and then eventually somebody from advisory found it, and they got that straightened out, and then it moved on. But this will be the first time I did it in one day, and I'm not sure if I'm looking forward to it or not, but at least it gets it done. They plan on taking a lunch break, however long, I don't know, half an hour,
Half an hour.
45, or whatever. And I think they're supposed to be bringing in some kind of food. I think I saw talk of pizza or something, but
A sack of burgers?
who knows? Good job, Mike, good job.
I don't think
See,
anyone's
that's
that-
an
that
infantry
good
man,
except
that's an
you.
infantry guy, always ready. So that's how that will go, and it's, like I said, it's kind of the selectmen's meeting, and then, I mean, we're there, and the first year, like I said, it was a little sloppy and nervous, and,
I think
but it
it'll be
was really
fine.
the first
One
one.
of-
Next year, it was better. Trying to think, last year, the majority of members were there, I think there was 5 of us, but, and there were multiple nights, so, some people, work, something comes up, they couldn't make this meeting, they made the next meeting, but, if you're there, you're there, and if you're not, you're not. I mean, it's not the end of the world, it's just.
one of the drawbacks of having this is they control what's asked and how the meeting goes. That's one of the drawbacks of having a joint meeting for this. Other communities have it separate. We've had it separate in the past. There's benefits to that as far as, we have, questions from our perspective versus theirs. They're gonna be looking at it from their perspective versus we should be looking at it from the legislative body for the citizens of the community. We may ask harder questions. We may agree. I can't predict how it will go, but when you have the body that's controlling the meeting, they control what's being questioned and what's being asked, and they can cut off the conversation at any time.
Well,
That's one of the-
I'd like to think that,
Last year, the first year, it was like
yeah,
that.
but I'd
The
like to
second
think
year,
that
it
this
was
is
not.
a new era, and that it's in their benefit to allow us to get the information that we need for the budget. So I don't think it's gonna be like that.
The first year, it was like, well, the
I
second
understand.
year, it was a lot better, and I expect it to be better this year. 'Cause I asked questions of, I asked Chief Bennett, the police department, some things about the animal control, the library, and I asked her to explain the CMARS thing that allows, you got a library card in Templeton, you can check out a book of Harvard Law Library if
Yep.
you want, that's the advantage of that. And one other department, I forget, but there was, Paul Grubb had some questions, he
Yes,
asked
he did.
some tough questions
Yep.
about explaining things and stuff, and, I think this year, it's the third year, and, I expect it to be, smoother than last year and way better than the first year.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
So it's, like I said, you'll see. 'Cause the first year, I think it sort of was that assertiveness and on the part of the select board, and It's one of them awkward things. It's the first time we had done that, but it got better. We did get information, updates and stuff, I will say that. There was no problem getting, you know, if something had to change in midstream, Carter was handing out stuff, you know, left and right. So
Well-
getting information was not the problem.
That doesn't predicate that we can't, at some point, start looking at the budget itself in more in-depth to ourselves, other than that meeting, and come up with questions and pose those to the department heads for answers. I mean, it's,
Ellen Mayo did come
he did, yes.
to a meeting after those budget meetings, to explain it, to expound on a couple of things, and he specified the importance of one thing particular over a couple others. He said, I'd like to have all four, but if I had to choose one, the administrative assistant, I believe, was the issue that he said, I really need that, and then this one. But
In
it
fact,
was-
having Alan come was very beneficial to the cemeteries and parks, because they had no idea as to what their perpetual care fund was, and we had members that had asked about that fund, and we pushed thereon after, and we actually found out what was in their perpetual care, and they had a better idea as to what their perpetual care accounts were, so they could end up using them, because they had been asking for some period of time and not getting an answer.
So, if anybody doesn't have it, anyone have anything else as far as this goes?
No, I mean, I think, I actually wanna kinda,
I do.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I do, but go.
Well, I
I'll
was
wait.
gonna recommend we kinda table the talk on how the meeting will go, because we don't know,
Yeah,
and that,
I would rather have, instead of having preconceived notions of what's happened in past years, just kind of experience it firsthand.
I have a question, and I figured I'd give you a report. I know it's not on the agenda, but if the chair would so permit it, I have a report from a meeting of the capital planning committee last week, if you want to hear any updates on that.
Can I ask?
That revolves around the spending plan presentation, the capital plan is in here,
Yes.
so.
Oh.
Either
I
some
can
changes
tell you
or-
how it came about in the questions that I asked, being the rep from this
Yeah.
body.
No, that'd be fine.
Okay. Capital planning meeting had, got some feedback based on some budget math that that the town administrator obviously had to, include within the budget book, and needed the capital planning, committee to approve, or at least review the new recommendations. I did feel a bit apprehensive at first because we had done a lot of work, and I thought it was based on some solid math and numbers. So what we did is that we had a couple spreadsheets given to us by the TA, the town administrator, and it talked about some additional capital planning based on some unrealized revenue and gifts. Probably the biggest one was that we had approved a $250,000 expenditure from a gift fund for the police station's three-phase generator. Just a quick background, the generator that they had could support their old police station, but not the new police station, and it was not a part of the new construction. As a emergency services, when it hits the fan, you want your police station to be able to have sufficient power, not just for the 911 service. They did find that they could submit to the state for a grant, and that basically returned $250,000 back into the capital planning budget.
Question.
Yes.
If you can answer, it. Do they have the grant in hand yet?
No, they don't.
Okay.
So they struck it. They struck that, which was one of our top 10 recommendations. But the feedback that Doug Morrison got as chair of the capital planning was that was a reasonable expectation that they would be able to get that within the next calendar year. So, again, I was apprehensive to say, why are you changing the plan now? It was based on our best guess for a lot of different things. So, what it really boiled down to was $303,000 of new capital expenditures that was not reviewed by the capital planning committee as part of the budget process, starting from September and October from last year. So it was basically $616,000 out of free cash or our budget that was going to be expended, which was $200,000 more than we thought we had, which was $450,000. So based on light and water grants, various sources of other income, they were able to increase the capital planning budget to $616,000. That's an additional $166,000. Of that, we reviewed all of the proposed purchases. A chipper, hot box, a lot of these should sound familiar. They're basically items that our departments have been asking for. So we had a very varied addition of capital expenditures. I can go through the list of them now, but I can tell you that we reasoned each one of them, looking at the merit, where the income was coming from, and in the end, voted to accept or ratify our recommendation or our endorsement of the new capital planning budget, which you all can see now, because it was incorporated into the new budget book. But I wanted to tell you how we got to that process. Are there any questions from that meeting, or any glaring?
My only concern is counting on a grant that you don't have in hand yet, similar to the playground grant that they had and then lost and then.
Yep.
Had, that's, if you don't have it in hand, I hate to count on.
Yeah,
No
well,
matter
they
how-
struck it. They struck the generator from it, so they basically told Chief Bennett, you're gonna get your generator, but we're gonna secure a grant for it. So they actually took it out of the capital planning budget. So the police, just to give you an idea of what the police are getting, the police department and they're getting a mobile radar sign, which is being paid for by Light and Water. Actually, Light and Water might be incorrect.
Can I ask what the cost of the generator is?
$250,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The actual, that sign. Stand by. Well, the sign's not being paid for by the free cash or the capital budget, but the police now, instead of having a generator, the police are getting a new 2019 unmarked police unit, a fingerprint system, and a mobile radar sign. In the future, they will get their generator based on, 100 kilowatt generator based on a state grant for that.
Just to
believe,
clarify
for a
on that,
budget-
That's not just for the police, that's because the dispatch is in the,
That is correct. That is correct.
and that is really critical, that can't go down.
Yep. The generator that they would be able to push forward to the new station could actually handle that, but it would be the only thing that it could handle.
The one
And
that they
it's one-phase generator rather than the three-phase that they need.
So we don't have a crisis on our hands until the new generators.
The new building.
Correct. And, crisis is subjective. Would they be able to provide emergency services or at least communication? Yes, but, in terms of, do the lights go on, do all the, any other fancy items that they have, those would be
They
affected.
need it for a basic operation at least.
I would.
Oh,
If I was using it as an emergency operations center, then I would want full power. Another major driving fact that the capital budget changed was that the light and water grant back to the town, that budget item wasn't known until recently. So many of the items that we went through to review were actually paid for by the Light and Water grant to the town.
Is there any
We
way
also
that was
discussed that.
presented?
So, say again?
Was there any public information where that was presented as to what the Light and Water was granting for the town?
Not to my
I haven't
knowledge.
sing anything, that's
No,
why.
you're right, and not to my knowledge. I actually didn't know until the capital planning documents were given to us that they not only had known that information, but but what it was gonna be used for. I don't know when that department realizes what they can get back. I don't know where their budget cycle is or what happens in collections or otherwise where they are able to realize that. But Doug Morrison said that's typical that they would not know in synchronization with other, what does Carter call it, a countdown to town meeting? With those critical tasks along the way.
They got a sufficient amount, they got about $500,000 back from one of the entities that they're into. I can't remember the actual enterprise, but they did get some type of monies back, whether if it was from the wind farm or some other
Yeah.
entity. And that was probably what they were looking at as well as
Yeah.
their budget.
I think the important thing, or an item that we should look at going forward is what's the trend analysis of their budget? Is it, if it fluctuates all the time, I understand these situations, but if we can at least plan on, as our budget stabilizes, I kind of should laugh a little bit because we're talking about all these, these unnatural things, but as our budget stabilizes, or at least as our town's trying to get it to stabilize, we should know these things ahead of time so we can factor some planning in there. Capital planning could have been much more effective if we were able to look at these things, if we had all of the revenue projections based in our budget outlay or our budget
Most
projection.
electric companies are actually looking to reduce their load because of the fact that they have to go off and purchase it from other entities. And there is a help program within the community that they can end up paying citizens for certain upgrades within their house, like heat pumps, et cetera.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that reduces their load as far as that. Plus, they also, I don't know if everybody is aware, but they actually give out LED bulbs.
I didn't know that.
They limit it as to how many you got, and they look for donations through a food pantry, and they hand those out. It's kind of,
Yeah,
you give us something, in return you get LED bulbs.
that's good that they're doing that
Yeah,
rather than
because
fluorescent.
they're in
compact fluorescent.
competition with, like, National Grid, and some of the others actually have a program where they do the audits, and they actually give out all those bulbs when they do the audits, whereby we don't do that per se.
Another item that you might have saw in the budget book is the rather large IT development package as under the Board of Selectmen's. We discussed that, and we discussed the kind of like what made that come to fruition. They had a funding source for it. It was that extra money that they gave to us. They basically said, yes, here's capital planning, here's extra money, but we already have a plan for it. As it was proposed to us, the $30,000 is multifaceted. It's not just $31,000 for a bunch of servers. It's an effort to basically, should I go on about it? Does anyone?
Yep.
So it's an effort to really synchronize the town, to make sure that there is data redundancy, meaning that all of the records that they have on electronics, that they're not just putting it in the cloud, or if it's just sitting on a server in this building. They're looking also to connect Council on Aging, Highway Department, and make sure that there is actually some file sharing and that there's some data redundancy there as well. So massive effort, kind of like the efforts of the cable committee to try and improve their network. This $30,000 should improve the town's IT infrastructure.
Wasn't some of that also to take and standardize the software? Because there was different levels of software throughout the community?
I don't recall if that was a specified line item, but I know that the town, has made that effort.
Yeah. Because you get different departments having different levels of software, which is not good.
Well, some of that was the Office 360.
Yeah, that's what
thing,
I thought.
And the purchase of a lot of new electronic stuff. So, thank you for that.
Yep, you're welcome.
So I guess if we're
And
along the.
we should
the
hear more of
spending-
that Saturday then, as
Yeah.
well.
So just real quick on, because it's
Yep.
also part of the spending, Baldwinville Elementary, we're going to, proposals are due at 2 o'clock on the 11th, and then on the 14th, we'll be reviewing them, so hopefully we'll get a few proposals.
And that's, 11 March, and you will.
11 March,
And you
we
meet
get
on the
them.
14th.
they'll open them at 2, and then we have a meeting on the 14th to review them and evaluate them and score them.
Alrighty.
I don't know if anybody found some of the issues that I found, but there's a number of issues where there's inconsistencies, math errors, et cetera. If you go through the book, you'll actually find them. If you want, I will end up going through some of them, especially the fact that when you look at the GOB, if you look at the documentation that's given to us, and by the way, I'm not a proponent of getting this book. I think it's a waste of time for us to get a printed book when they're going to update the electronic version of it. And on what's on the website, people are already looking at, and it's out of date. It's
Yep.
way out, and they have not in the past updated it per se, and that's, if anybody's looking at this other than ourselves, they're gonna be looking at it from their perspective of what they have today and not what the changes are.
Well, maybe they on the
Let's
online
talk about it
stuff,
on
they should-
Saturday. I mean, that's
Maybe they
our
should just put a
25-minute
disclaimer
target
on
for discussion.
Because if you look at the bond that they went for, I found, and I did a extensive amount of research on this, is that in the book versus in the minutes of meetings 2 weeks prior, there's different numbers. There's no consistency. On the 13th of the month, they actually had in their packet a document that was for a press release dated February 7th, where they had the bond as $12,195,000. You look at the debt exclusion portion of it in the book and online, you will not find that number. In fact, I tried to emulate their number, and what I got was a much higher amount for the bond. And I don't believe that, even if there's a bond premium, that when they spell it out over a number of years on one of their documents, that $18,000 is not a premium that continues year to year. That, as it sits, I actually came up with two numbers. If you look at the actual number as to what they actually put in the paper, the $12,195,000, that represents an increase in the taxes of $1.12. That's in addition to the $150 that we're talking about the school, if that passes. And what they had in the book represents actually $1.14. So I mean, and I used the state calculator that all of us should be familiar with. I presented some data, and I mean, hopefully people went and took a look at that. I took the time to look at that. There is additional bond information that they projected, and in different places, it's different numbers. If you look at the minutes of one particular meeting, they're talking about $12 million in, I think it's the TAs. But when you look at one of the pieces of documents in our book, even if you add up the 10 million and the 1 million, it's not the 12 million. that they're going to go for additional bond for the school, that represents at least another dollar. I mean, the amount per dollar, okay, may change, so it's somewhere around the dollar. We can't see that until they actually go, what it costs for a dollar might, instead of being the $689,000, it may be $700,000, so if we calculate it on one number, it might come out to $1.15, and when that number comes out, it'll maybe come down to $1.10 or lower.
Yeah, Will, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, as you're looking through it and you're finding errors and/or inconsistencies, like you
Yep.
were just talking about,
Yep.
do you bring them up for, as a list so we can get them corrected when we have the budget, or are you just angry about that?
No, I'm bringing them up so that we can bring them forth to see if they get corrected or get clarification.
Okay. Well, I don't want to see if they do. I want to make sure that they do. I want to make sure that we're presenting it so they do make those changes. That's what I believe.
Or we understand the
yeah.
information.
Right. I think, I heard what you said in the beginning of the meeting about, watching us and everything, and I guess from time to times, I do struggle a little bit with what this body here does, the advisory committee. Are we the 7-person auditors of everything that comes out, finance-wise, or do we wind up helping with, like Chairman Kaplis has asked for, well, we need some help to try and figure our way out of this mess. So I'm just want to make sure that
Should
we're
we
able
be-
to put it in the right
Should we
bucket.
be the auditors? Not necessarily. Are we in the position as advisory in looking at this and actually digging into it? Yes, we become auditors. I can't say that we don't, but that's not the part of the function per se. But in digging into this, that's when you end up saying, okay, I'm looking at this and trying to take and understand it, is when you start making and seeing mistakes. I mean, it's just, when you start digging into this and trying to get clarification, it does come about that you are auditing more or less.
Right.
But that's not necessarily, in some communities, believe it or not, the advisory or finance committee is either on or they are our audit committee of the books, not generally the budget person, they do the budget besides. That's another function, depends on how governments are set up in different communities.
Okay.
There is other things that I saw, and I'm sure that you all saw, the information from Mr. May. $240,000 plus is a significant error to be made. That's inconceivable that you should end up having that large of a math error
Is-
on a document that the whole town is seeing.
Is that the free cash thing?
Yeah?
I met with Adam, the other day.
Is that an email?
I think I went in Wednesday about a question about
Do you
that.
recall what day?
And it's something about the formula. There are several issues in here, even including the advisory budget. You look at the numbers, some of it is from last year's information, and other numbers are what we voted on and I submitted. And I showed him that as I filled that spreadsheet out to email to him, I printed out each sheet. So I showed him what I had and how, I have, he asked me something about, well, maybe it's the version that you're using, but I'm opening the cloud version. So I don't think it's, I don't know what happened in the formula transfers, but he told me, and I got no reason to, he just explained that he was aware of the free cash numbers being off, and it was something about in the formula, and they supposedly gonna have corrected sheets to hand out. Again, this has happened in the past, like the school stuff is gonna have to be changed because the information that's in here is different. Why do they put it in there? I think they put it in there so you have an idea of what is coming down the pike. It will get adjusted, and changed. So on that note, I know, and I made him aware, cause I said, hey, I had a question about this, are you aware? He goes, yeah, I know that formula is off. We talked about the advisory numbers being different. And I said, here's the sheets I printed out, here's the table that we voted on as a committee.
Yeah.
And when I submitted them, I said, this is what was submitted to you, because as I filled out that spreadsheet
Yeah,
that you
this is
sent,
the split the difference thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, I have the numbers that I emailed you, that I filled in, because I printed them out, because I don't trust this electronic junk. Sorry, I'm old fashioned. I know you like that, but, I showed him, and he says, well, I don't know what happened,
Well.
because generally in Excel, if you put 3 at 383 and you total it, it adds, up, for you.
Yeah, I did see.
But I'm showing 2,000.
So the formula was just wrong.
Something happened in the interim, and we can address
Yeah.
this when it comes our turn on Saturday. And, hey, what we voted was, for instance, to go to MMA was 4 people at $500 each, and it should have been 2,000. And it says 2,000, but it has 3 at 383. How did that happen? I don't know. He was at a loss. He said, well, maybe it's your version. I said, I'm opening the email that you sent, and it's the cloud version. But
So they sent out the electronic copy today.
Yep.
And if you look at it, you've got the total free cash, and then you've got 5 line items that are supposed to be subtracted off of that to get the number. The formula that they have, whether it be inadvertent or whatever, only subtracts the very last one.
Right.
The 4 above it. So if you change the formula, it works perfectly.
Right.
So
that's
it's just a
what
formula. So
he's-
one of the things I've been doing, not so much looking at the numbers, I spent a couple hours or so, well, actually, as soon as we got this, I started taking a look at the formulas.
See, and that's
Because
why
the
you're
formulas are wrong, it doesn't matter what numbers you
Right,
have.
exactly right.
Yeah.
There was method of madness making you the clerk here.
I mean, the reason I bring this up too is that this is no different than in 16. In 16, different administrator, I'll say that, we had 22 versions of the budget. Even the budget was being done the night before annual town meeting, after the selectmen had already voted a budget and it was being changed. And it was because numbers were being put in and changed around.
There was one issue, again, it was a formula thing, and there was some back and forth, the advisory's off, no, your number, and then the town administrator admitted, oh, yeah, no, it's a formula thing, and they fixed it, but anyway, these are a lot of things that will
Hopefully
get
they'll
hammered
find
out
some of the errors and they'll
Saturday.
Get them corrected.
And, like I said, I don't know if a one-day thing is gonna be good or not, it's gonna be
It's gonna be great.
great.
Positive thinking. It's
Whatever
gonna
you
be
say,
great.
Amy, it's great, it's great,
It's
all
gonna be
right.
great. We
All right.
can't go in there with an attitude that it's gonna be
Uh,
XYZ.
the
We need to
pink
go
hair-
in there with an open
The pink-haired
mind.
lady told me it's gonna be great, it's gonna be great, it's gonna be great,
In
all
with an
right.
open mind and a mind to get this done and accomplished and to work as a team.
I'm gonna
It's
go
nice
home.
that we have so many eyes on the paper. It's nice that we have so many minds to come together. It's gonna be great.
But the whole goal
Actually, it's great.
of that
I'm sorry.
meeting is to come up with a town budget that the town can essentially afford.
Right.
And the fact that they've asked us to come and do this, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And there will be some changes, some hiccups, there's just, I mean,
Well,
there's
it
a
is.
lot of stuff to get correct I mean, yes, I know, it involves the money, it's the most important thing we do in the town, and it should be correct the first time around, but realistically, how many things of this size
But-
involving the government gets done, I mean, is spot on.
But running a town isn't free.
Right.
Well, the original budget package that they sent us a number of months ago, before they actually approved and gave us the books, is all last year's information, if you look at it. A lot of it is just last year's information, because if you look at the,
That was to fill in and to change your numbers for this year.
Right,
And that's
and
what
I
I
un-
think some of the.
I understand it, so you can't really go by that. They're supposed to be putting a new one out, but I also see, minor mistakes is, to me, it's inconceivable that you should end up doing. When you have a total budget of, in the last three are 201, and the revenues are 205, and you have a surplus of $3. Last time I looked at math, 5 minus 1 is 4. It's not 3, it's not 2, it's 4.
So that can be explained though. The way that, so if you look at all the numbers, there are no significant digits. So if you add significant digits and you do the math, it actually, it is right. But as soon as you get rid of the significant digits and have to round either up or down, you can always be off by one.
I understand it, but you
It's-
don't see those in the formula.
No, and that's why having the electronic version, because that was the first thing I
That's
looked at. Is
that's
yes.
exactly, that's
And
why,
that's exactly why that's showing up like that.
that's why I always look for the electronic version,
Yes.
so that I can end up checking that type
Yep.
of stuff.
So
Bec-
to your
but when you
point,
put-
the electronic version is really what we need.
Yeah.
The book is nice, but, and I know.
To me, it's a waste. The electronic version is really what I need to take and end up doing. And
Agreed.
and as you saw, I put out that, it's nice that on one of the pages that we're gonna end up being able to put our numbers in. But what if we wanna change an individual budget or a line item? It doesn't, we don't have the capability of rolling up, only on that top level budget
All right.
document.
So, is everybody looking forward for Saturday? Hey, let's have some order down there. This is an official meeting now. This
It's
isn't a
Mike's
meeting
fault.
without-
We were mentioning that the-
Purple-haired lady causing trouble here, I can tell.
No, it was Cheeseburger Man.
So,
So if we do
getting
find
mixed
mistakes,
Hamburger.
Chris, what's the method of reporting that? It's email you or?
it's kinda simpler to have, come to one and hear from one, but, I mean, if you find something that's really glaring or something, and I might not be, sitting at home looking at my stuff, cause I look at it like early in the morning, but at like 7, 8 o'clock, and then I'm gone, and I don't look at it until I get home. I mean, if you're sitting at home and you find something you think is really important, you can shoot Adam an email and say, hey, or Adam, hey, a question on this. Hey, I found this, you need to check this.
I would send it to Adam, he's pretty responsive with his emails even.
Yeah,
he
emailed me back the other morning at 5:30, cause I said, hey, I found a couple of errors, and he thought, what? And that's why I went down and talked with him, and he said, oh, the free cash, he says, yeah, we know, that's a formula thing, he said, we know about that, so.
Even after going through Saturdays, don't believe that you won't find an error. I mean, there's over 400 pages here, folks. That's a lot of pages for anyone to take and end up making sure. If they are not a good auditor or whatever, and they're not checking their work or whatever, or have somebody check their work, there's going to be errors. It's up to individuals to bring those forward. That's why I bring them forward, so that we know what they are, and they can be corrected.
I'd really like to see the department heads make
So-
sure that their budgets are right, and the math is right.
Yeah, so, I know there are advantages to having it electronic, I realize that, but I like the paper thing so I can make scratch notes and do stuff. And in case my computer crashes, I still got the paper copy, and that's my method to my madness.
I know this might take a couple minutes, but could we go over one of these? Because there's something I'm seeing that I'm either just confused about or,
What's that?
okay, so. Let me blow this up.
Which page?
Which one are you going to?
So I'm using the spreadsheet.
Yeah, what
Okay.
page?
It's the, just the general fund.
Page one.
Sorry, okay, I will try to.
Page,
You don't
the
have a particular
overview of
page?
the general fund.
Um,
One, no, not like this.
It's,
Page 10? General Fund Department expense?
page 12.
Page 12?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
that's the one I was talking about, the math error.
Yeah,
So if we take a look at the top line item.
Yep.
The general fund budget. If we turn to the next page, does that number include the top number, the capital budget?
No,
no, different.
So going back to the first page then,
I think they're separate.
where is that represented in the total all budgets at the bottom?
on page 10. That's the general fund the department, expense budget.
Yeah, there's somewhere in there should be a number of about like 17, this 17 million thing.
It's-
It'll have
And
all
on
the-
page 10, it's,
So-
it's 9,633,416.
I can help out with that. So. That total capital budget is monies forward, the free cash, right?
Yeah.
When you
Well,
look
it's in the
at,
capital, it's in the capital budget, the capital fund budget.
oh, right, but it got there from free cash and other stuff.
That's correct.
When we look at page 12 and we see town articles, capital A, capital B, that capital A is the operating budget. So the ambulance is a lease. They're putting $100-something thousand towards ambulance number 2 from capital planning, and that assumed a lease of the next 5 years at a very set rate. We can only go for a certain amount, but the operating budget basically handles that lease. Lease to own, remember, we're not gonna give it back, because we're keeping it. A matter of fact, emergency management is getting the old one. They needed a truck to tow their stuff. Well, they were quite happy to get the ambulance that would be able to do that. So they're gonna renovate the inside.
Yeah.
They were supposed to get $50,000. Instead, we gave them $30,000 and an ambulance that we already owned, so they could actually fulfill that. So when you see the $56,000 there, that is this year's budget operating budget obligation to take care of the capital planning expenditures for this FY.
And there's a,
that were paid
by the
for
way,
by our-
there's a reason why it's an article. And the reason why it's an article, and if you look at, the Board of, the Board of Assessors, the 22,000 for reval, and then the school, those are articles that, when we approve those articles per se, and they go against the budget, that they don't, if they're not expended by the end of the year, they continue on. They don't go, because they would become free cash if they were just in the general fund budget.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
why it's distincted that way.
Right, that's why the capital planning said to the Board of Selectmen, if you're not going to get, you have to get the stuff that you say you're gonna get. You can't just balk, you can't figure out, you can't say, no, it was approved. Like you said, it becomes articles that they
Right.
pass.
It's
and
a
they-
lease.
And when they don't get them in a timely manner, it creates more of a problem.
It's a lease that has multiple years that the funding has to take it into
5
payment.
years. And they knew that. Carter basically said, don't go over, I think it actually said, he said, don't go over 56,000. That's why the math for what we're paying for a down payment this year was within budget.
So the $17 million, give or take, total budget
It's not
does
good anyway.
does not include the capital budget.
That is correct.
Okay.
And it's
Some of it, yes, but it's based on those changes that I told
Okay.
you about.
Okay.
And it's not correct anyway, because the school has changed from the 332 and the 158, it's.
But as
it's
far as
now
Lee's question, that's the reason for that.
7,479.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
to point out this little area here, but you don't have a real total to work with, because we have other numbers we gotta plug in.
Yeah, I'm just interested in, like Amy was saying, we're all gonna come to the table and we're gonna help each other out. If we see errors, we're gonna correct them.
Because
Yeah,
one of the things
so-
also that has to change is the override that's needed for the school, because if you really look at what the school has, it was like 7,500,000 before they certified. Now it's 7,400,000 and something, right?
Yeah, 749,
Yeah,
479, 46.
479. If you take that away from what's allocated on page 12, is the 6,333,000 and 158, that comes out to 6,491,000. So there's roughly $1 million. It's not 988. And you were correct when you said a million. I didn't correct you because I knew, I knew that the math was not correct.
It's the nine eighty-eight.
The school has a free cash.
The 988 is the school operating increase.
Yeah.
But the 1,146
Right.
is
Is
from the
ours.
state. It's from the state numbers that
Okay.
increase.
Yep,
So but it totals 1,146,654.
right,
The 988, and I know it gets a little thing, but that's the operating cost
right.
from
Deb,
the
do you
the
remember
school
what that
district.
thing
The
that
other
we
is
had
the
asked the question
increase in
about?
transportation.
Their free cash?
And you being wealthy because your
Yeah.
property values increased, the minimum contribution went up.
NNM,
And
something
that's,
like
and
that.
that's that. So,
E&D,
Oh, yeah.
the E and D fund is their,
their free cash.
they're like, their free
The
cash.
stabilization,
Yeah.
And just like, the certified retained earnings from an enterprise fund is their
Yeah,
unassigned funds that they can use, for different things.
and they're using it.
And the school has, you know, it's not to their advantage to have a big buildup in E and D because it gets, once it gets 5% of their operating budget, they're mandated to use that money above that
right,
for their budget.
that's correct.
So it's not to their advantage to have that, it's their advantage if they have a large sum to stuff it different
Mhm.
places.
I
So
think
you
it's every
don't
June
report.
30th that they have to submit their budget and going forth. And then, by October, I
If
believe, is when they end up,
That's when it will be
that's when they end
certified.
up certifying the E and D.
But it starts, July 1st. They have to have certain,
Right.
again, they're on a time frame. The light and water under 164, they have a time frame with the Mass General Law about when they have to report stuff. And they have to report to the town through the annual town report and their finances. And the state's they're on their own, they're almost like the federal government they're getting, so they're like, they don't even follow the state constitution. They're on their own schedule, which makes this job, balancing a town budget really hard, because you don't have solid numbers till September or so. So, anyways, we will get to have all this fun. And like I said, this page 12, the school thing is off. I mean, that's, so the bottom total is off, so any math errors in there, can point them out, but this school, school stuff is gonna have to change. And it's, like Will said, there's over 400 pages, there's bound to be, you have 1-2 individuals doing this, in a pretty tight time frame. So, 8:30, Saturday. We'll see you all there.
You looking for a motion to adjourn?
Okay, so, okay.
Close mic.
Our
please.
next regular meeting is March 21st, 6:30, regular time here. Does anybody right now have any, if you don't have any agenda items and you think of one, just email me so I can put them on. It will be the minutes,
Can
the
I make-
budget. We should be getting a monthly expenditure report. In April, we will have the report of the meals tax for the next quarter, so we'll have a total on that to see how close to that 42,000 they were talking to, which right now it's really tight, reaching that figure.
Can I make a suggestion, Mr. Chairman? That once the Board of Selectmen get around to actually giving their recommendation for the budget, and that happens at the latter part of March, that we start having weekly meetings and to take and end up, not so that we're sitting one whole night going through a book that's 400 pages, is to break it up into small segments and have a meeting every week on a small segment, maybe a couple of budgets, 2 or 3 budgets, go through them real quick, see if there's any questions. That's the end of the meeting. We have a good idea as to what the questions are, what the budget is, and move on. And then by the time that we get to April sometime, and we start to really start to formulate our recommendations more in depth, we have already gone through it, and we've done a lot of work on this in small segments, rather than big chunks.
I'm looking at open days that we can meet. There's, you know, I think it's sometimes Mondays are open now, but you gotta be cognizant of, conservation and stuff. It's just, you know,
Conservation generally meets in the small conference room.
but no, they've been in here.
Right, but that's when they
I'm
have a-
watching, I've been watching the meeting and trying
Yeah.
to plan for that, but, you know, it's, if we can get extra meetings, then we'll certainly
Put that on
schedule
the
them
agenda for next week.
in the next, especially in April, but, so hopefully the warrant will, they will stick to their schedule and the warrant will get voted on and it'll be closed and we'll get that at least so we can look at that. All right, so that takes care of agenda items, if any, and if you have one, just email me and I will put it on there. Member comments. Tony asked for this, so I will, what I can remember, my old man's brain. I attended the sewer meeting, commissioners meeting on Monday. It was recorded, it's on YouTube.
Yep.
So you can watch it. Selectman Capellas and Brooks were there. A former advisory committee member, Bernie Heaney, was there. And all three sewer commissioners were there. The superintendent, who I believe is retiring, was not there. I don't know if he's still on the job or if he just had a day, whatever. But anyway, they were there. And the major topic of discussion was the collections issue. The option that the Board of Selectmen voted on, you know, directed the town administrator to, you know, to move on trying to get implemented by July, including getting opinions from legal. Well, after a nice quiet meeting on Monday, it wasn't that bad, but, and I attended and I had a little input on things. The sewer commissioners agreed, they stated that they would have, either they or the superintendent would do the evaluations of the non-union employees and send them over here. And, the chairman of the board, and he might have misspoke, but he said, well, then we'll get the raises processed. Well, you have a vote by the Board of Selectmen already to direct the TA to do one thing. So to me, before you could actually do this one thing, you gotta go back to the board and have a vote. And so, but that was general agreement, hey, we'll send the evaluations over and those raises will get done retroactive to at least last July. So that was sort of like an agreement and they've kind of smoothed that one over. The collections item, the sewer commissioners are not opposed to moving the collections. They have a problem and real issues with billing and either transferring or eliminating sewer employees to move them to town hall. You know, my comment was, if this is an effort to save money, then you should not be charging the enterprise fund to do collections at the treasurer's office, because you are in effect, all taxpayers in Templeton are not sewer ratepayers, but generally speaking, all of the ratepayers are taxpayers. And their property taxes are already paying to operate the collector's office. If you charge the enterprise fund, then the sewer rates need to be adjusted or are being used to also operate the treasurer. So the sewer rate are basically paying twice for a service. If one of your arguments or the case to be made is, by moving this here, you will save money, then, and it's perfectly legal to bill an enterprise fund for that cost. So you have an accounting of the true operating costs of an enterprise fund, which is why you set up an enterprise fund in the first place. And that was my point. If your thing is to save money, then don't charge the enterprise fund, because they're already paying for the operation of their private taxes. The collections, the sewer commissioners they said, well, we can't agree to doing that by July, because, and they're kind of right on that, it's a process and it's gonna take more time than doing something fast. They said, we should go through the process, agree how it's gonna do, and implement it, and maybe plan, you know, a longer time span, maybe next year or in the middle of the year, which is probably a bad idea, but they're not in favor, and they didn't seem to wanna move, to do it in July. And again, the select board already voted, they've already made, you know, a director to the town administrator, and to me, if they're gonna, you know, change stuff around, they would have to rescind that vote, and then meet with the sewer commissioners to come up with a true timetable on collections. If it's collections and billing and stuff to get up here, and the selectmen kinda said, well, that was just an option, and, you know, something to, you know, to discuss. But I watched the selectmen's meeting, and it didn't seem like it was an option. It was a plan, go move forward and make this happen. So I think there's movement down there between the two elected entities. And like I said, I believe the raise thing has been, or is going to be solved
It sounded
before the
like
end
it.
of the fiscal year. They said, we'll do the evaluations, then we'll get those, Chairman Kaplan said, we'll get those raises processed. Well, you know, it kinda maybe that's the plan, and convince the whole board, but, you know, the chairman can't. But there was good movement on that. The collection process, moving that here is gonna be drawn out a little bit more. But like I said, it is, I walked in and I goes, wow, cameras here. This is a first for a sewer meeting, but it's up on YouTube, so you can watch it.
I think
So that
I
was a
watched that
good-
today, but I think part of the reason for the delay is the compatibility of the billing and collection software that the sewer enterprise and the Templeton Municipal Light and Water use. Because, according to what I listened to,
Yep, that's exactly right.
their systems agree, water and sewer agree, but the system used here in town hall is not the same.
And
So it would all have to either be made, and he said, Mr. Machete said his is a closed system.
It's not, yeah, it's not.
It's not
online,
cloud-based, it's not
email, so-
online, there's no access, it's like
UIT is gonna.
virtually unhackable, right.
Yeah.
So, which is great, it protects the integrity of everyone's information, that's great. But, as far as transferring those collections over here, to keep it in the system and to eliminate the need to re-input that data again, to sort of make it seamless, I think that it was my feeling watching it that was where the issues were gonna be.
Yep,
Cause then it turns into money.
yep,
Again.
exactly.
Yeah, and, like I said.
It's gonna cost.
They've made one step, and,
Yep.
you know, like I said, the collections
I
thing,
know.
I don't think it's gonna happen as quick as it may be wanted,
Well, it's
wanted
good to
by
see that
one
there's
side
some
or
movement.
another, but, that's where
Mr.
that
Heaney's made
stands.
a point very well, I thought, is why do you wanna take on more work when it's gonna create more issues?
Anyways,
Thanks
that's,
for that, Jeff.
that's pretty much the nature of what went on down there. Like I said, the raise thing was the biggest, it looked like that was a step. Somebody blinked, somebody needed to, and kinda diffuse that situation, and, hopefully that gets worked out. And then, it'll just be a process to watch, to see how that goes. So, having said that,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Wow.
that purple-haired lady, man, she has a point. It's all good. Motion to adjourn and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone wish to stay?
Yes.
Alrighty, we'll see you next
later
week.
then.
Meeting adjourned.